I think a lot of people assume that sounding natural in French means having a perfect accent, never making grammar mistakes, and basically sounding like you were born in Paris. And that's just not true at all. Some of the most natural French speakers I know still make mistakes all the time. What makes them sound natural is how they speak, not how perfect they are or how long they've studied French. In this video, I want to talk about how to sound more natural in French in a realistic way, especially if you're a student, a learner, or just someone who doesn't live in France. This isn't about perfection, it's about sounding human. One of the biggest things that makes people sound unnatural in French is when they try too hard to sound advanced. A lot of learners focus on long, complex sentences, fancy vocabulary, and sounding academic, but native French is actually so simple. People use short sentences, basic verbs, and a lot of filler words. If you're always reaching for the most impressive word, your French is going to sound a little bit stiff. Natural French is more about flow than complexity. So instead of asking, how do I sound advanced, ask, how do people actually say this in real life, not in textbook French? If there's one thing that makes your French instantly sound more natural, it's filler words. French speakers use them constantly, way more than English speakers realize. Some essentials I like to use are j'en, en fait, du coup, pas, and One that my French professors like to use a lot is n'est pas. Even just adding one or two of these makes you sound way less rehearsed. Instead of saying je pense que c'est une bonne idée, je pense que c'est une bonne idée en fait. It's subtle, but it changes everything. Another big mistake is building every sentence from scratch in your head. Native speakers don't do that, they kind of speak in chunks. For example, je sais pas, c'est vrai que, j'ai l'impression que, ça dépend. If you memorize full phrases instead of individual words, your French will sound so much smoother and faster. This also helps with confidence because you're not panicking over every verb ending. Think less grammar, more patterns. You need to accept that your French personality is going to be a little bit different than your English personality. This is something that no one talks about enough, in my opinion. Your personality in French is not going to be identical to your personality in English, and that's totally okay. In French, you might be a little bit quieter, more neutral, more direct, or like less expressive at first because you just can't find the words. This doesn't mean that you're bad at French. It means that you're still building range. Trying to force your English personality into French often makes people sound a little bit unnatural. Let your French personality be a little bit simpler at first, and it will grow over time, I promise you. Okay, another thing you need to know is to copy real spoken French, not textbook French. And I know I kind of already said this. Textbook French is useful, but it's not how people actually talk. If you want to sound more natural, you need exposure to spoken French. This means you should be watching YouTube vlogs in French, interviews, podcasts, TikToks, and just listening to casual conversations wherever possible. You should be listening for how sentences kind of trail off, how often people say ça instead of repeating nouns, and how informal contractions work. For example, je ne sais pas turns into je sais pas. Il y a turns into y a. Tu es turns into te. You don't need to copy slang aggressively, just absorb the rhythm and know what it means. One of my biggest tips is to stop translating directly from English into French. A lot of unnatural French comes from English sentence structure. French doesn't always say the same things that English does, even if the meaning is similar. Instead of translating word for word, you could ask, how would a French thinker approach this idea? For example, I made a video about this on my TikTok, but to say I miss you in French, the sentence structure is totally different. You basically end up saying you are missing from me, and that's just the way it works in French, and it happens with a bunch of other verbs. And I don't know, I think it's kind of romantic that way, but different structure, same feeling. The more you accept that French has its own logic, the more natural you're gonna sound. The next thing I want you to do is focus on intonation, not just pronunciation. Pronunciation obviously matters, but intonation matters more than people think. French has flatter intonation, fewer dramatic pitch changes, and smoother sentence endings. Sometimes people sound unnatural, not because they're pronouncing things wrong, but because their intonation is too English. So I would say try listening to how sentences fall at the end, how questions are asked casually, and how emotions are expressed without exaggeration. Even small changes here make a huge difference in sounding natural. The next thing I would say is speak even when it's not perfect. This might be the most important point. You will never sound natural if you wait until you feel ready. Naturalness comes from repetition, exposure, and making peace with imperfection. Some of the most natural sounding learners are just the ones who kept going even when it felt awkward. Confidence isn't something you gain first. It's something you build by speaking anyway. I wish somebody had told me earlier that sounding natural doesn't mean sounding native. It means sounding comfortable. When you stop trying to prove how good your French is, it actually gets better. Your goal isn't perfection, it's connection. If you're learning French and you feel stuck, I promise you're probably closer than you think. Sounding natural is a process, and it's definitely not just like an overnight switch. If you want more videos about learning French realistically, sounding confident as a student, or building a French routine that actually fits into your life, you can subscribe or leave a comment of what you want to watch next. Thanks for watching. Bisous.